Okay, so we're diving into a tough one today, a story that's really hard to stomach.
Yeah, definitely a tough one.
Nathan Ashton.
Right.
Remember him? Star footballer,
Okay.
Premier League,
Wow.
and now he's facing serious time. Like 16 years serious.
16 years.
Or rape
Right.
bone
Oh my gosh.
twice.
Wow.
I gotta say, prepping for this, reading through everything, it's just,
Mhm.
how does someone go from that level of success
Yeah.
to this?
Yeah, it's a real gut punch for sure. The contrast is just, it's hard to wrap your head around. But I think as we get into Ashton's story, it's important to remember that this, as tragic as it is, isn't an isolated incident.
Right.
We've seen these kinds of falls from grace before, and unfortunately, they tend to reveal some uncomfortable truths
Yeah.
about power, fame, the pressures that athletes face, especially in the public eye.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so let's get into it. Ashton's crimes. It's heavy stuff. The first assault, back in 2015, he attacks a woman in a car. And the detail that really gets to me is that he tells her, "You'll live." It's like he thinks he's doing her a favor, instead of, ooh, sends chills down my spine.
Yeah, it's chilling, and I think it's incredibly revealing. That statement, it suggests a disturbing level of control, this belief in his power over another person's life. And you have to think about the context here. This is a Premier League footballer. The fame, the adulation, it can create a really dangerous sense of entitlement. It can really blur the lines of acceptable behavior.
And then, years later, he does it again. This time, the victim was asleep at a friend's house, completely vulnerable. Both women, they went through hell, years of silence out of fear, then the entire ordeal of the trial. And their victim impact statements, reading those, incredibly powerful, talking about the trauma, how this is something that never really goes away.
And that's the heartbreaking reality for so many survivors of sexual assault. The fear, the self-blame, the very real possibility that they won't be believed if they come forward. Studies actually show that these fears are often amplified when the perpetrator is in a position of power or influence, like a celebrity athlete, for example.
Right.
It creates this immense pressure to stay silent.
It just gets more complicated, because 2015 wasn't just the year of that first assault. Ashton was also convicted of armed robbery that same year. So this wasn't just a fall from grace, was it? It seems like there was already this pattern of criminal behavior even before his football career went downhill.
Exactly. And that's where things get really complex. Was this darker side always there, maybe masked by his success and the accolades?
Right.
Or did the pressures of being a professional athlete, maybe underlying mental health issues, did those contribute to this destructive path? It's a question that's really difficult, maybe even impossible to answer definitively, but it highlights the need for greater awareness and support systems within professional sports.
It really makes you think about the immense pressure on these young athletes.
Yeah.
The adulation, the money, the sudden fame. It's a lot to handle for anyone.
Oh, absolutely.
And then you factor in the potential for mental health issues, which might be overlooked or even made worse by that pressure. It's a recipe for disaster if the right support isn't there.
It really is. And I think we have to remember that these aren't just talented athletes. They're young people, often thrust into really extraordinary circumstances. And when things start to go wrong, whether it's an injury, declining performance, or just the eventual end of their career, they can find themselves adrift, struggling to reconcile who they are with their past glory. It's a recipe for disaster if the right support isn't in place.
Yeah. This whole case, it just makes you wonder, were there signs, red flags that we all missed? Or maybe, even worse, chose to ignore because he was a star?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And I think it forces us to confront our own perceptions. We tend to put athletes on a pedestal, but we need to remember they're human beings, capable of great things, yeah, but also capable of terrible things. This case has to serve as a reminder. We need to hold people accountable for their actions, regardless of their status, their talent, or their past accomplishments.
It's a lot to process, for sure. But I think you've hit on something incredibly important there. We can't just focus on the fall. We have to look at the system that often allows these situations to happen in the first place.
Exactly. It's about fostering a culture of respect, accountability, and support, on and off the field.
So I'm left with this unsettling question after this deep dive. What can we do as individuals to make sure that history doesn't keep repeating itself?
Yeah.
What can we do?